Hey guys, my name is Grim. Welcome to my video guide on building for Battlegrounds and non-CP. This is an interesting topic and I think it's been a long time coming, but first let me just cover what I think is the fundamental difference between CP and non-CP. And I can break it down like this. There are three sort of attribute focuses in the game, right? You've got your defense, you've got your offense, and you've got your recovery. Because you don't have CP, all of these are diminished. Now, in a sense, I like to think that defense and offense are weakened in equal portions. You have similar things like some base resistance increases, some damage over time resistance, crit resistance, direct damage resistance, and then you also have things like damage over time amplifiers, critical strike amplifiers, piercing amplifiers, mighty, you've got Master at Arms and Physical Weapon Expert, all things that amplify your damage to the similar proportion that you increase your defense. However, when it comes to recovery, there's not much that it is opposed against. It kind of stands alone as a very important aspect of any build. So without that tumbling, Mooncalf, Arcanist, Warlord, Sprinter, all these things that you might normally be relying on, I believe that it is your recovery that gets hit the most. It doesn't matter that you do a lot less damage because everyone else has a lot less defense. And it doesn't matter that you have a lot less defense because everyone's doing a lot less damage. However, what fuels both your defense and your damage is your recovery. So that's how I like to build for Battlegrounds. When I'm building for Battlegrounds, I build recovery builds, and that is because it's the thing that gets hit the most, in my opinion. Now, in my opinion, there are two good ways to build for recovery. There is a alternative recovery route, which doesn't include the stat that's called recovery. It includes cost reduction of various sources and also increases to other modes of recovery. And I'll explain what that means. But I think the best way to do it is straight recovery stat if you're a Wood Elf, and if you're not a Wood Elf, then not straight recovery stat. Then you want to focus on mitigation. So, because I am a Wood Elf, this is my build. I'm currently running 5 Troll King. I've got 4 on the body and 1 on the jewelry. Just happens to be how it is, no reason in particular. And then on my front bar I have Spriggans, which is still my favorite front bar damage set. Nothing has changed there. And then I just have 1 Spriggan Pants, 2 jewelry, and the front bar axe. I really like an axe in non-CP. Even though it lowers your tooltips are pretty low anyways, but the bleed damage from the axe is pretty significant, and it can really chip away at people. It also goes through mitigation, and because people build a little bit more mitigation through their sets in non-CP because they don't have CP to counter things, I feel like the axe really does perform very well. On my back bar, I've got the Master Bow. I recently changed out my weapon damage enhancing glyph to a poison glyph, so once again, lowering my tooltip, lowering my healing, but my damage has increased a lot because more sources of damage is usually going to be more than amplifying your damage a small amount. For example, if my weapon damage increased by 400, it's very unlikely that I would be able to get in enough abilities to make up the difference of 4,400 damage tooltip. Like, I'm not going to add that much damage to my combo with a weapon damage glyph, but this poison damage glyph does hurt a lot, and you'll see that in the gameplay. So I've been really liking this. Anyways, so I am a Wood Elf. This means that I want to build max recovery, and this is simply because of the Wood Elf passive. So if you go into racial, you can see that your phrase endurance increases my stamina recovery by 21%. This is a very important stat. This means that I will benefit disproportionately compared to other races by building in stamina recovery. And that is the only reason that I build stamina recovery like this. So currently, in order to do that, to get this crazy stamina recovery of 2,500 on my front bar, and even higher, 2,700 on my back bar, and this is without a potion, I use the Serpent, I use Bone Pirate, and I use 1 stamina recovery on my jewelry. The other 2 are going to be weapon damage. For this build, I like 1 Swift, and I really like 2 Protective. Because Bone Pirate gives us so much max stamina, we can afford to run no Robust. And with Shadow Barrier active, my resistance goes up to 21,500 for both physical and spell resistance, and that's really nice. So the critical resistance is not going to be accurate of what you'll see in a non-champion point environment, because of course I do have champion points. One thing to note, because I do have such high recovery, I'm worried less about well-fitted, and I'm trying to increase my impenetrable. So I've got 1 well-fitted, maybe 2 well-fitted pieces, but the rest are going to be impen, and that is because I don't have any other way to get crit resistance, and crit resistance is still important. I think in general it's less important in non-CP because people's crits hurt for less and happen less often, but it's still really important to have, and it's going to make a significant difference in your toughness. So between that and the 2 protective, you actually get really decent stats defensively. On top of that, you of course get a ton of stamina recovery. Part of that is because I'm Wood Elf, and part is because I am running Werewolf on my back bar. Werewolf is really great because, once again, it gives you a really big boost to stamina recovery, being 15%, and since I'm running high stamina recovery, it amplifies it pretty significantly. So, that's what I'm running. I really like this setup, but what would I do if I wasn't a Wood Elf? Well, that's a good question. Other races that don't have that 21% stamina recovery boost are not going to benefit disproportionately the same way I do. Therefore, a better form of stamina recovery is actually going to be impregnable. Now, bear with me. It sounds kind of crazy because, of course, there's no stamina recovery built into this set at all. It's usually harder to sustain with this set, right? Well, not exactly. Because this gives you 2400 or 2500 if it's golded out critical resistance, it means that you can run non-impenetrable traits on everything. And if it's golded out, that will give you a benefit of a 35% decrease in the cost of dodge. So let's do some math there. A standard dodge roll costs 3,654 stamina. If you do that once every 10 seconds, you're going to actually save 1,278 stamina per roll. Well, actually 0.9, but we'll forget about the decimals. So you're going to save about 1,278 stamina every 10 seconds if you roll once every 10 seconds, because that's what a 35% decrease in the cost is. That means that the recovery that you gain is equivalent to 255 if you're only roll dodging every 10 seconds. If you were to roll dodge back to back, then you would suffer from an increase in the cost of dodge roll. So that would make it 3,654 plus a 33% increase. It goes up 1/3 of the cost. So then it'd be 3,654 plus 4,859.82, which is a 33% increase for a total of 8,513. So if you were to dodge roll back to back, it would cost you 8,500 stamina, and that's a lot of stamina. But if you're wearing 7 well-fitted, you would actually get a decrease of 2,979 on that cost, which means that if you were to roll dodge back to back in a 10-second increment, you would be saving, you'd be gaining what is equivalent to 595 stamina recovery. So that's actually a lot. That means that essentially, by wearing impreg and by wearing all well fitted, whenever you sprint or dodge roll, you're saving a huge amount of stamina, equal to if there was a line here that said you gain 595 stamina recovery, so 600 stamina recovery. And that is quite a bit. In fact, it may even be worth it on Wood Elf in some circumstances, but it's somewhat relative, right? If you're not in combat, if you're not rolling or running, then it's not going to save you and recovery is going to be better. If you're in stealth, recovery is going to be better. But if you are not a Wood Elf, if you're a Red Guard, for instance, which is probably the second best race for Nightblade, or maybe tied for the best depending on how you look at it. If you're all melee, then maybe Red Guard is a better fit for you. But the point is, if you have a Red Guard which has a different means of recovering stamina via the passive that they get, then it may be better for you to run impreg with all well fitted. You'll actually get more critical resistance because you get 2,500 from impreg, which is a lot. And if you're rolling twice every 10 seconds back to back, or if you're rolling once every 10 seconds even, you're going to gain somewhere between 250 and 600 stamina recovery, or the equivalent of that in cost reduction. So that's a big deal. It is for those reasons that I really like building this way. In non-CP, I always focus on recovery. If I can't sustain, then I can't stay alive. I can't cast defensive or offensive abilities if I can't sustain, and that's really important to me. One more thing to go over is going to be the monster sets. I really like running Troll King. It's still the best defensive monster set in the game for solo Nightblades. The recovery it gives you is just incredible, and it allows you to put up with a ton of pressure while you're laying down your own damage. So whether you're trying to get those axe bleeds, proc your poisons, weave in your light attacks, just putting pressure on enemies in general, Troll King allows you to do this by giving you crazy health recovery while you're doing it. So it's a passive form of defense, and I like that a lot. Another good option is Blood Spawn, especially now that in-cap costs more, essentially. If you want to get the knockdown, you can go Blood Spawn. It will give you some tankiness, and it will give you some ultimate recovery. That's a good option. And if you want to go all damage, Celine's is going to be the best way. Celine's is much more effective than running 2 damage glyphs, because of course, like I said earlier, having more sources of damage is more efficient than running higher damage. So instead of running, 2 sets that give you 129 weapon damage, run Celine's. It will give you 1,000 stamina, which is the equivalent of roughly 100 weapon damage anyways. And since your max stamina is going to be decreased without your CP, it's even more valuable to have that extra stamina because it's a usable form of damage. You can actually consume it and use it to roll dodge, run around, whatever. And then on top of that, the proc has a huge tooltip. On me, it's 15.6k, but that's after CP. It's probably going to hit for around 6,000. And it can't crit, so your lower critical rating in non-CP is not going to matter that much either. So Celine's is the way to go, in my opinion, if you're looking for a damage proc. That being said, I still really like Troll King because it allows me to put on pressure and keeps me alive when I am solo. I don't need to rely on anyone, but if you have a healer in your group or you're running in an organized group, you may find that Celine's works better for you. On my front bar, I'm using double damage health poisons. These are extremely potent. I like them a lot, especially now that you have more werewolves running around. Having more sources of poison damage certainly doesn't hurt. It's also worth mentioning that I'm still using my trusty Essence of Weapon Crit pots, my favorite pot in the game. You gain health, stamina, and major savagery. Anytime I don't need magicka, like absolutely need it, I will use this instead. If I do need magicka, I'll use a tripod, which gives me health, stamina, and magicka. But I find that the magicka recovery is a little overkill, even given my very low magicka recovery. But a lot of people are more comfortable with higher magicka recovery, and that's perfectly fine, more power to you. But whenever possible, I try to use these weapon crit pots because they just increase your damage and your healing, and that's really nice. That's fine by me. So with that, I'm going to show you a game of Battlegrounds. This is completely unedited. It's the full game. I don't win, but it's land grab, so what can you do? In any case, I hope you enjoy it, and please, as always, feel free to leave any questions that you have in the comments, and I will do my best to answer all of them. Thank you guys for the continued support, and I will see you next time.
Victory will be ours!